Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are strapping ourselves in for, well, one of the most successful, but also strangely controversial stories in modern endurance sports. We're talking about the Norwegian model. And you've sent us an incredible stack of sources, old academic papers, personal notes, articles, that honestly, they force us to look past the shiny new success stories and uncover the true and often fiercely disputed origins.
It feels like a crucial investigation. I mean, the response from those initial clips we shared, the ones with Frank Evertsen, it was just unprecedented.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Those segments shot up to 22nd on the general Norwegian podcast charts. That tells you just how much people want to understand the real history here.
And that brings us to the elephant in the room. We have to address it right away.
The Voldemort analogy.
Exactly. When we talk about Frank Evertsen, we're using that term, and let's be crystal clear about why. We are not in any way suggesting he's an evil wizard.
Not at all.
We use the term because he is the person that many key figures in the Norwegian sports establishment, they actively refuse to mention him by name. He is the ultimate he who must not be named in this story.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is to, disregard the politics, pull out the documents, look at the facts, and just discuss the science, regardless of who might protest.
And that political layer is exactly why this is so necessary. History isn't always written by the winners. Sometimes it's actively edited by the gatekeepers.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the man who synthesized it all. Who exactly is Frank Evertsen, the architect of this model?
Well, and this is the key thing. His story starts with him being what he called a mediocre skier.
Right, not some natural talent.
Exactly. He got frustrated with his results from all the traditional high-pain methods, so he just started experimenting on himself in the late 80s. But he anchored that curiosity in academia. He enrolled at the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences, the NIH, around 85, 86, and he ended up spending about a decade there. He became a PhD stipendiate and was teaching the crucial subjects, cross-country skiing, training theory, starting in the mid-90s.
So you have this perfect mix, right? The personal drive to figure it out for himself and the academic framework to actually test his hypotheses.
And his perspective wasn't just limited to Norway.
He went abroad.
Big time. His coaching experience was diverse. He was in Japan with cross-country skiers. He coached running. But the source material, it really highlights his time at East Africa. He was a trailblazer in Kenya, traveling there frequently starting in 1990, 1991.
Wow, that early.
That early. He was there to observe and really, really understand why Kenyan runners dominated. And this wasn't a tourist trip. He eventually moved his family there and lived in Kenya for a full year in 2003.
So he's mixing traditional Norwegian distance work, academic rigor from the NIH, and the practical reality of the world's best runners.
When does this all get, codified? When does it get a name? This is the critical historical nugget. The foundational synthesis, the core framework, and the name itself. It was all captured in the project description for his PhD.
Okay.
And this was around 1994. The document had a specific subchapter, and the title was The Norwegian Model.
So the name, the actual term, was officially put on paper 2 decades before the rest of the world really started paying attention.
It confirms he wasn't just, retrofitting a name onto a success story later on. He was systematically building and labeling the methodology from the ground up.
Let's get to the core philosophy then, because it's probably the biggest challenge to how most people think about training. He called it durability over disaster. What did he mean?
He was directly challenging the accepted wisdom of the time, especially in cross-country skiing, where the mentality was basically to train like the lumberjacks who came before them.
Just maximum effort, maximum pain.
All the time. Yeah. And he realized this brute force approach, it just conflicted with basic human physiology. He had to trust the data, not the tradition.
And the central idea that came out of that.
It's so powerful in its simplicity. He said, it's not what you can do a little of that makes you good. It's what you can do a lot of. So the focus shifts completely away from those killer race-pace workouts that leave you wrecked for days and towards high sustainable volume and frequency.
And to make that high volume sustainable, you need precision control. This is where his great metaphor comes in, the brake fluid.
Absolutely. The brake fluid is lactic acid.
Right.
Evertsen's crucial insight was that the goal is to operate at the fastest possible speed without generating a lot of it. Because if that brake fluid piles up, it gums up the works. It slows down your muscle's ability to process fuel, and it just completely compromises the training effect.
So you're saying if you push too hard, you're not just getting tired, you are actively slowing down the very adaptation process that's supposed to make you better. You're sabotaging your own durability.
Exactly that. Most people, even really competitive athletes, they train too hard on their hard days. And honestly, often too hard on their easy days. The Norwegian model focuses on intense control. You do intervals, yes, but they are controlled. For the elites, this often means double thresholds.
Can you break that down for us? What is a double threshold day and why is it so effective?
So it's intense, but critically, it's controlled intensity. The effort is targeted right around the anaerobic threshold. That's the point where lactate, that brake fluid, just starts to accumulate.
Okay.
The goal isn't to run as fast as you possibly can for 4 minutes. The goal is to increase the total time you're exposed to that high controlled stimulus. So you might do, say, 45 minutes of total threshold work in the morning and then another 45 in the evening.
You're maximizing the exposure to that sweet spot for adaptation without crossing the line and getting flooded with brake fluid.
Precisely. And that discipline has to extend to the recovery days. The long, slow distance days must be truly slow.
And what does that mean, truly slow?
Zone 1. We're talking a heart rate around 120 beats per minute, slow enough that you can have a full, easy conversation. Speak in long sentences without gasping for air. No junk miles that are just kind of medium hard.
This philosophy, it brings us to what might be the most counterintuitive result of the whole model, the VO2 max paradox. Most of us assume that to raise your VO2 max, the size of your engine, you need to do that lung-bursting, high-intensity stuff. But Evertsen's findings, they completely flip that on its head.
This is where it gets really fascinating. His experience showed that athletes coming from that traditional polarized model, the really hard days and really easy days, they saw massive improvements in their VO2 max.
They're massive.
In some cases, up to 10 milliliters. And they did it by reducing their intensity on interval days and focusing on volume at threshold.
Wait, how does that work? How does more controlled work improve the maximal engine size better than maximal work? It just defies common sense.
It comes down to the mechanism of adaptation. That all-out maximal intensity work, it primarily trains the central system, your heart's stroke volume. But the threshold work, done over a long cumulative duration, is way better at increasing the peripheral components.
What do you mean by peripheral?
Things like mitochondrial density, capillary growth in the muscles, the enzyme activity inside the muscle cells themselves.
So you're basically turning the muscle cells into better, more efficient engines rather than just training the heart to pump harder.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
You're increasing the body's actual capacity to use the oxygen at the muscle level. And that's a huge long-term boost to VO2 max. And we have some extreme data points to prove it, like the case of Sindre Baraas.
His numbers are just, they're legendary.
Baraas was already an elite athlete. He had a genetically high VO2 max of around 87 or 88.
Which is already world-class.
Absolutely. But after he shifted to Evertsen's controlled high-volume method, his VO2 max jumped to an extraordinary 96.4. That is almost unheard of in a fully trained athlete.
That's astronomical. And it's proof that the limiting factor wasn't his genetics, it was his training structure. And Evertsen wasn't just designing the philosophy, he was bringing in the tools to make it possible.
Right. Think about Marius Bakken. Evertsen introduced him to systematic altitude training in Kenya and, crucially, systematic lactate measurement. Before that, Bakken himself described his training as being from the Stone Age.
Oh, right.
The data shows that after just one winter of applying Evertsen's principles from October to the next summer, Bakken improved his 5,000-meter time from about 14.20 down to a world-class 13.22.
A minute off his 5K in one season, just through structured control. That is stunning proof of concept.
And that control was enabled by technology. Evertsen was the first person to bring the lactate pro meter to Norway, possibly to all of Europe. He brought it from Japan in the 90s.
And that's the little device you see athletes using now.
It's the ancestor of it. This little instrument lets you check your brake fluid levels instantly during a workout. And now, it's non-negotiable at the highest level. The Ingebrigtsens use the updated Pro 2 version religiously.
So, okay, let's recap. We have the academic foundation in the mid-90s. We have the philosophy. We have the proof of performance with Bakken and Baraas. We have the technology. Why, then, are we having this deep dive about a man who is the Voldemort of Norwegian running? This is the historical oversight we really need to get into.
The lineage is incredibly clear in the documents we have. It traces from Evertsen's experiments in the late 80s to the studies in the early 90s to the work with Marius Bakken in the late 90s, and then the model travels south.
South to where?
It was taught to people like Eric Chugad and Bjørnar Christensen down in Sandnes around 2005.
And Sam is, of course, the epicenter for the Ingebrigtsen family, the public face of this entire model. The threat is direct.
It's absolutely direct. Evertsen has asserted, based on published training logs, that the template used today by these top athletes is structurally identical to the one he laid out decades ago. It's high volume, controlled threshold, all enabled by lactate testing.
So why the aggressive resistance? If the documentation is this clear, the PhD chapter from 94, articles from 93, the lactate meter, why do key figures in the sport minimize or just refuse to acknowledge his contribution?
It's a fascinating political dynamic. There seem to be a few layers, but the sources suggest it's a mix of institutional pride and professional history. When a national success story becomes this big, there's a fierce desire to claim ownership for the current system.
Often by the very people who might have resisted it in the first place.
Exactly. It's safer for the establishment to present this as a new, homegrown phenomenon from current coaches, rather than an intervention from an outsider who challenged their old methods.
So they can maintain the narrative that this success is just a natural evolution of Norwegian sporting culture.
Instead of the result of a paradigm shift forced by one individual who dared to question the lumberjack tradition. And this refusal to give credit, it creates this bizarre historical vacuum where the foundational architect is just. He's written out of the public story.
It's an active rewriting of history happening in real time.
That's the most accurate way to put it. The documents speak for themselves, but the politics try to silence the source.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, who's just trying to train smarter using this model? Evertsen called it the Rima 1000 model, which is a budget grocery store in Norway. He meant it's simple and accessible.
But the complexity isn't in the plan. It's in the discipline.
The day-to-day discipline.
That is the ultimate takeaway.
Yeah.
The sources confirm that the best athletes, like Jacob Ingebrigtsen, succeed not just because of talent, but because they are the absolute best at training correctly. They execute this simple plan with astonishing control.
And they have the discipline to back off when they need to.
Yes. The discipline to dynamically adjust or even just stand off a workout if the body is showing too much stress. They stop that brake fluid from ever building up. They prevent the burnout that takes out so many others.
The irony is that the world-beating secret is having the discipline to not push to failure.
Yes. They prioritize longevity over the short-term ego boost of a killer workout.
So the fundamental lesson from this deep dive is clear. The foundation of Norway's running dominance, this intensity-controlled, high-volume threshold method, has deep, demonstrable roots in the work of Frank Evertsen. It was systematically developed decades ago through academic rigor, new technology, and field work in Africa, a fact that is now subject to some pretty determined historical revisionism.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, we've seen that maximizing performance isn't about some secret, complex formula or just embracing pain. It's about the highly efficient and disciplined execution of simple principles. And what stands out most is that success requires the discipline to hold back. So this raises an important question for you. If the secret to being the best in the world is simple control and the discipline to moderate your effort, where in your own life, your work, your health, your hobbies, are you sabotaging long-term gains by chasing short-term unsustainable intensity?